Welcome to your podcast, Leadership is Tricky, where we'll tackle various topics, challenges, and experiences as it relates to your investment in leadership. So, let's design success together. Now your hosts.
Hey everyone, Erick Sits here with Leadership is Tricky, and we are back. I have a very special guest today. We met a year ago at the Association of United States Army Symposium in DC, and I'm here with Brigadier General Antionette Gant. How are you?
I am doing very well, Eric. It's great to see you again.
Likewise. I think when we met back in DC, it was just this weird cat standing next to you, and you were like, and I just started talking to you, and then we started talking about some things, and here we are a year later on the eve of AUSA again. So that's exciting.
How crazy is that?
I know. So I'm glad we were able to make it work, and we are here. And so right now your position is the Chief Army Enterprise Marketing Office out of Chicago.
That is correct. So this job was started back in 2019 when it was called the Army Marketing Research Group stood down, and then they developed the Army Enterprise Marketing Office. And our responsibility is really developing the national strategy for marketing of the Army in support of our recruiting mission. And not just recruiting mission from a green suiter standpoint, but also civilian as well.
Right. So I saw, I did my research, right? I found your bio, and then I started doing some research on exactly what it is, right? And one of the things that I like to see, it was really taking Army marketing from the industrial age to now the modern digital age. And then your guys' focus on transforming soldiers and leaders and building them for tomorrow, right? So I know it's a tough job. I see your recruiting patch there. Because, we just don't do a good enough job, right, telling the Army story. And then, and the recruiting numbers have been down a little bit, but I'm glad you're on our side.
Well, yeah, it's, the one thing that we say is we have to make a connection with the community to the Army. I think so. It's not where it used to be, where everywhere you went, there was someone who has actually served. And so now what we're finding out is, how do we resonate? Looking for strategies to make sure that individuals can see themselves, especially in the population that we're looking at, the 18 to 24-year-olds. How do you see yourself doing something greater than, just for you? How do you feel about serving your country? And just, again, getting them to also understand that there's over 150 jobs in the Army that have something very compatible to it is if you transition out of the Army. So this allows you to be able to learn those trades and then be able to actually make them where they're useful to you if you decide to only stay in for 2-3 years. We were talking, you had a 7-year career, right. But then you come out more marketable than you were before you actually came in.
Oh, absolutely. I remember, and we talked a little bit beforehand, and I've said it on the podcast before. So I graduated early, and then, tried my hand at, education, and just wasn't my thing. And, I joined the military, right? And my career as an enlisted soldier, right? I took everything the Army could offer, right? It was, they basically paid me to work out. They paid me to learn. Right? Yeah. To get involved, and you can be as involved or not involved as you want, but certifications, education was paid for. I've never paid a dime of education. I went to Harvard, right? So I got it behind me here, right? The Army paid for all of it. And I wouldn't have had that opportunity had I not, been around the military culture, or I wanted to make, that commitment to my country and its interests. So I owe the Army everything, because I even work for the Army now as a government civilian and giving my life to service. And I think it's tough, right? Because even now as a leader, as we're getting younger people into the workforce, I used to be that young guy, by the way. I'm quickly finding out I'm not.
We all say that, right?
It's hard for me to relate because they just think differently, right? There's different things that they're motivated by and they're inspired by, and I have to try to tap into that. And the only way by doing that is talking to them and understanding, really what it is they want to achieve in life. And I tell my story, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we try to do from a standpoint of also understanding the data. We research a lot of information to be able to truly understand the prospect and to be able to help with the prospect's journey. So
Right.
it's about understanding the data, but also working with our recruiting force so that they too can be able to tap in and have a conversation with those that they actually encounter to be able to talk about not just about what they've done, but also understand what it is that they want to do, meaning the prospect wants to do.
Right.
I was just talking to someone the other day, and we tell individuals like you to say, hey, go out and tell your story so they can understand the possibilities of what's there. But I think that we have to start with the first question, and is what is it that you want to do? And then understanding where they are then allows us to be able to give those great examples like you just did about, hey, I'm a Harvard grad, and not a dime of that was paid from anything that I did, but because of the opportunities that I actually had in the Army. So this is truly the best job. And I know people that hear this and that know me or we go, wait a minute, I thought the last job was the best job. But the fact that I am in a job that knows that every day is doing something to allow us to be able to influence years from now. The Army that we're building now is the Army that we are going to be able to sustain and have, 10 and 20 years from now. So I'm really blessed and fortunate to have an opportunity like this.
Yeah, and I'm excited about it because my daughters are going to be able to stand on your shoulders. So thank you for
Well,
what you're
good. I'm
doing.
ready to sign them up.
Right, that's it. Hey, once they leave here, if they don't have a plan, they're going to the MEP station. So but no, it's good because we've been talking about journey, right? So I want to start with your journey, right? I want to share your story with the masses, right? We have thousands of listeners now, and I really want to start at the beginning, right? So where are you from, and then how did you grow up, and let's hear from you.
Oh, sure. So I'm from a small town called Port Gibson, Mississippi. If you've heard of Alcorn State University, we're about 20 miles east of Alcorn. And my parents actually went to college there, and my father was from the town. And so, the closest we call it the big city, was Jackson, Mississippi to us. But growing up in that location, my parents both were educators. And I was huge in sports and I was huge in theater. Those are the two things that I enjoyed doing. But then when it came to thinking about college and where I was going, recruited for a D2, but not D1. And so, look, I want to be able to make the choice of where I want to go because I had options of various places I could go. Um, and one thing that was different for me, military was nowhere in my thoughts of,
Okay.
of actually consideration, for a career or even just like, okay, well, you can go to Army Reserves or you can, do something part-time. And I had family members that had done it, but I'm like, that's just not for me. But I was in the junior ROTC program and I went to my counselor and lo and behold, I didn't even ask for an Army ROTC scholarship. I asked for a Air Force because everybody thinks Air Force is so cool. But then, she was like, well, I don't have that, but I do have an Army. And once you fill it out and, somebody would say that maybe she tricked you because she said, well, maybe it's transferable. It's like,
Right.
okay, I'm not sure if this is transferable or not, but it's an opportunity for me to be able to select where I wanted to go. And at that time, I still wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to study. Going into my senior year, and so I filled out the scholarship and did the interview process and got a letter before the end of the first semester of my senior year to say congratulations, you've been accepted and you can select where you actually want to go to school. So now it's like, let's get in the real business of, okay, what major you want to do. And
Right.
it was one of my parents' students that actually talked to me about being a civil engineer that allowed me to say this is something that I think I would want to do. And it really had to do more with the fact that she talked about how you could improve your community with helping to design and be master planners and things of that nature. But my parents have always been one of they've always been those people that say, you're not going to sit around and do nothing. And so every summer they had me doing something, whether it was Upward Bound, where it was going to a special program. And my mom was a physics, biology, and chemistry teacher. So just think
Okay.
about that. She was like, okay, science is where it is. But I enjoyed math and science. So, thinking of engineering to be a career field was like, yes. And back, if everybody's got this book, right? Your yearbook, and it says what you think you're going to do.
Hmm.
Mine said that I was going to have 4 kids, I was going to be married, and that I was going to be working at an engineering consulting firm. Mm.
Oh,
The only thing that's true about that is I'm married.
okay. I was gonna say, how many kids you got?
Two,
Okay.
only
Right.
two. But I selected Prairie View A&M University, which is a historically Black college in Texas, because of its engineering program. One of the top, still is one of the top engineering schools for minorities. Was very adamant about wanting to go to a historically Black college, and they had a very distinguished ROTC program. Wasn't my first choice. I first looked at Southern, and my parents took me down to Prairie View, and I just fell in love immediately with the people and the campus, and said, yeah, this is where I want to be.
So how much, because both your parents were educators, right? So, and hearing your story right now, you keep going back to your parents, right, being involved in this educational journey, and
Absolutely.
right. So how much of an influence they have in your life, right?
Oh my gosh. I mean, 100% in everything that I do. I mean, I talk about my parents being educators, but they were the examples in our community. They were the people in just our subdivision. We're the only house on that street that had encyclopedias. So
Okay.
people would come to other students would come to our house to be able to. I mean, I know encyclopedias. Like people probably are like, "What is that?" Especially
Right.
Gen Z. They're like, "What is an
Oh, I
encyclopedia?"
know
But
Encyclopedia Britannica salesman. We had it. We had it at our house too. The,
absolutely,
the the maroon
yes,
books, right?
all of them. And so they were just very involved from that standpoint of not just nurturing their own children, but children within the community. And outside of just being educators, my parents were both Greek. So they were, with their fraternities and sororities. They did a lot of volunteer work. And so they were just huge examples of, hey, education is important, but also connecting to your community is also important. And this is not just about you, but it's about making sure that you're helping to make a difference, no matter what it is that you decide to do.
Right.
And the biggest thing my dad would always say is, number one, you've got to be you because everybody else is taken. So just be the best version of you that you can actually be, and know that somebody is always watching you. And because of that, if you be you, then they will hopefully see great traits that they too would like to have and replicate as individuals, and as just as good citizens.
Those are great words. I've shared this before here too, because I try to be that for my daughters, right?
Absolutely.
So we do words of affirmation every morning, right? So basically they could be anywhere in the house, and I yell out "be," and they're like, "Hey, be smart, be confident, be curious, and dream big," and then they'll add one, right? But we stress in our household, education, live your purpose, right? Or you're gonna
Yes.
always live someone else's purpose. So we tell them, hey, don't be in the crowd. Let's go ahead and stand out, do things that might be uncomfortable for you, push the status quo, exercise the activity of leadership, which, when I talk to the teacher, they might say my daughter's a little bossy, but but
It's okay.
but that's okay with me. I live for it, because I'm pretty sure they're not saying it to the little boys in the class, right? But it's interesting though that just listening to the first part, right, from inception to you looking at going to this historically Black college, right? is your parents were there along the ride with you. And I think that's extremely important to have, that foundation and have that support, right? I think.
Oh, absolutely. And whether it be your parents, whether it be a school teacher, whether it be a coach, my coach also was very instrumental. His name was Mason Denham, and we won four state basketball championships in a row. And
Okay.
so again, I talk about the fact that I wasn't the best, player on the team. I did start, two of those years, but the thing that he would always say is, you are a leader on the floor just by how you actually carry yourself.
Right.
And, all we need you to do is do your part, and my part was the rebounding and the defense, where there was somebody else that actually, was the one that actually brought in the scoring piece. And so those are the pieces of the puzzle. And you learn how to navigate. And this has been very instrumental throughout my career, I would say, in how I actually navigate, how I lead, because of those things that I learned just from there, from high school, from elementary to high school, and then even to college. And the reason why I went away to school was because I wanted to go someplace that nobody knew who I was. Because I knew if I went to Alcorn State or Jackson State, I was going to be close. And everybody goes, "Oh, that's my maiden name was Butler. Oh, that's Mr. and Mrs. Butler's daughter." And my
Right.
thing was, let's go somewhere where no one knows who I am. And I can actually, again, be an authentic of who I wanted to be and pursue the things that I wanted without feeling as if somebody was looking behind my back or around me to be able to judge based on who they knew that my parents were.
All right. So then you go off to college, right? So you have
Yeah.
this affinity for, science, technology, mathematics. So you're smart. We just heard you could play some sports too, I don't know if you can see behind me. I got my little basketball
I
trophy
know.
back
I
there
love
too,
it.
right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm a
I'm a
basketball guy.
Laker fan, so.
Mm, sorry. Yeah. So let's talk about, going through college, right? Because I know I don't care who you are, right? That first year of college is tough, right? It's trying to
Yes.
get used to, independence. You're on your own. You need to study on your own. You're just given a little bit of tidbits and direction, and then you got to go off and figure this thing out. So let's talk about that. So you got your JROTC scholarship,
I do. Yeah.
right? You're doing your science, in mathematics. You want to be an engineer. So walk us through that process for you.
Yeah, I always say, people think when you get to a certain point, it's like, oh my God, you've been successful all your life. No. So I went to college with the understanding that in high school, I think I had one C on my entire record. And so it was like, this is what I expected being in college. Like, hey, this is going to be an easy ride, or this is going to be one where I'm going to be able to maintain the same things that I was doing in high school. And it was not. It was very challenging to do ROTC. My first year, I wasn't playing. I played basketball my second year for the actual university. I did intramural, but just trying to navigate and make friends, to be still part of kind of, your social activities, but knowing that you got to stay on track. I was in a 5-year program. There's no tendering from moving off from this 5 years. I have to graduate in 5 years, so that I can be able to move forward. And so I spent a lot of time in the library. I spent a lot of time with tutors, understanding that there's a lot that I didn't know. Yeah, getting that first C was like, oh, my at the time, my husband now, who was my boyfriend, he was like, it's okay, you have not failed a class. You may not feel as if you've done your best, but if it is your best and that's what you've come out with, that's something still to be proud about. And so yeah, we made it through, and I still graduated with a 3.0 or better average. So hard work. It is
Right.
definitely hard work. But being in college, especially away from your family, I would say is, for me, it's the growing up period. It does exactly what you say. It allows you to understand and know what it's going to be like to continue on and being an adult, because you don't have anybody waking you up.
Right.
When you can choose to go to a party or you can choose to go and study. And my first year, I was really good. I'm not sure. I think I spent Friday nights like in my room studying more so than I did partying. But over time, I learned how to actually make that social be a part of what I was doing too.
Yeah, I do these sessions, and I just started doing it like 2 months ago, where I meet a lot of young professionals, so really young soldiers and young GS workers, government civilian workers, in my office at right, early in the day. And one of the things that I ask them all the time is like, why are you here? And we go through this exercise where I keep asking the question, why are you here? And I got that from this one of my Harvard professors, Tim O'Brien, because people typically tell you what's on the surface, right? The first time you
Mhm.
ask them why they're here, and they'll give you like, oh, I want to be here because I want to, right? And then you just keep asking to get down to the root cause. And most people, they talk about they're here in this moment because something has driven them here, right? Whether they wanted to get away from their situation, they want to give back to their country, they want to, have a better life for their families, right? But it's born from some type of like inspiration or trauma or something that's driving them to want something better, right?
Right.
So I've been talking to the folks about what you mentioned earlier about it's okay to fail and fail often because that's how we're going to learn, right?
Absolutely.
Right. Because
Absolutely.
typically what people do is they'll see you or I or some of my other guests or people that they look up to and they think we came out as this polished rock. I was like, no, we came out of the mud, and then you start sharing that story with them, and that's why I thought it was really important for me to connect with you, because the first thing that yeah, I mean, outside of the fact that you looked at me a little crazy when we were at the AUSA, it was the fact that I looked over and I saw this black female general officer standing next to me, and then I saw the engineering tab, and I was like, I had never seen that before.
Oh,
Seriously,
wow.
it was something new to me, and then
Hmm.
I really wanted to understand like your story. And right,
Yeah,
but it goes back to what you see is not the finished product, but it's polished, right? And I'm so glad that we're here in this moment and to hear your story up to this point is right. You had the influence, you had the community, but even deep down inside, you wanted to get away to find your own identity, right?
absolutely.
And then you had your support system, which your college sweetheart, who's now your husband, was even there to pick you up when you got that devastating C, right? And you got through it, and that's amazing. And thank you for sharing that. I just want folks that are listening right now or watching this right now is to understand that we don't get to where we're at by not having adversity. It's that adversity that makes us strong in who we are, right?
I say it all the time. If you don't go through anything, you truly don't know and understand what success is truly about. There's a book, and it's really for parents. It's called The Gift of Failure. And during one of my when I do more now, I'm on Audible books, so that's easy because I can drive and listen. But there was one time where I would do a lot of hardback books, and so when I was deployed, I would always make it my purpose to at least have a book a month. So 12, I know I'm going to be deployed for 12 months. And so one was called The Gift of Failure. And this book talks about how even at a younger age, we have to allow our kids to fail. Smaller things, for instance, oh, mom, dad, I forgot my paper, my report today. Can you bring it to me? No, you
Right.
got to figure that out, so that again, too, when they do have successes in life, they truly understand that they've worked toward those successes. But it's all of those things that help to build them to where they're, and know that everything is not just gonna, it's not gonna be easy, or there's not gonna be a mechanism to be able to make things or have them where they can just easily come to you. And so not just, with my kids, but also as I mentor other officers and enlisted or non-commissioned officers, junior non-commissioned officers, I tell them the same thing. You are going to fail, and that's okay. Actually, we say failure just means that it's an opportunity to actually attempt of learning. That's what it is. A future opportunity to actually understand and learn.
Right.
And from those failures, we understand more and more about what success is. I go back to my high school. In junior high school, we were undefeated. So then when I got to high school, I was thinking, okay, this is going to happen. Pretty close. I think my senior year was my year we went 42-0. But then I got to college and I played basketball, and it was like, oh my gosh, we are just losing. Like again, too, like it was different. It
Right.
wasn't something that I was used to, but there were lessons that I learned from that to say, are we growing? Are we being better teammates? Are we, going to be better the next year because of what we actually learned? And that's the same way in life. The attempt is for us to be better tomorrow than we were today because of the things that we have not maybe done so well with.
Yeah, I had a boss. I was his deputy, and he was Brigadier General Bosch. Now, he would say it every single day, right? Hey, look, everyone, every day better. And then he said it for like weeks, almost months. And then one day I was like, why do you keep saying that? He was like,
Yeah.
cuz we should be learning from today or this moment, and every day should be a little better than what it was yesterday, right? So you can't cheat the process. You have to live in the process and enjoy the journey, and throughout that, what I say, it's heightened levels of this equilibrium, right? That those levels of
Mhm.
chaos that enter our life, we have to learn from those events, so that way when they happen again, right, we can deal with it without being in this heightened level of stress. And no, that's good. So, all right. So you finish up college, right? So you graduate, and where did the military come into the picture for you?
So, you as when you're in the RTC program, your junior year, you go to what's called the advanced camp, and this is where you get to see all of the different branches within the Army that you can select. If you want to be a chemical officer, if you want to, be air defense, all of them have displays in regards to what they are doing. And so it was at that moment that I actually went to the engineer. Display that they had and learn what engineers did, and said, man, this is very close to what I would be doing if I was, in a civilian capacity. But still in my mind thinking, when I graduate, I'm going to do this reserves. This is going to be a part-time thing for me. This is not going to be something that I'm going to do full time. But after coming back and finishing up, my professor of military science, Jimmy Garrett at the time, talked to me and said, hey, you have a lot of goodness from a leadership standpoint, being a leader. And I know you're talking about reserves, but why don't you just give active duty a try? Why don't you see, what it's like, and know after, you have 4 years, and you decide this isn't what you want to do, you can go back to being in the reserves. I had an internship with a company called Black and Beach 2 years in a row. And I'm like, this consulting firm, they've already offered me a job. And so, but then I went back and I told them, I said, hey, I'm going to try active duty and see what happens. So that's how I selected active duty, and I selected being an engineer. First duty station was Fort Hood, Texas, which is now Fort Cavazos. So I got to stay in Texas.
Right.
And we used to call it Prairie View at Fort Hood, because there were quite a few of us that had just graduated in those 2 or 3 years, and we were there. So again, support system, right?
Mhm.
Somebody to help you maneuver through. And my first job was as a topographic engineer. Topographic is more about map making at the time, or overlays for warfighters and things of that nature. And it was a part of which I again had not done. So engineering, being an engineer officer, offered me the opportunity where you could do the combat engineering, where most people think about the blowing up of things, but then you could do the construction piece where, okay, we blow it up, but now we build it back. And then the topographic, I mean, there was just so many diverse fields of just being an engineer that I thought it was pretty cool. And after, being at Fort Cavazos and saying, okay, I'll go to the captain's career course and see what that leads. And here I am 30 years later, still in, because every job has been different. Every experience has offered me something more than what I thought it would. And, leading soldiers has been absolutely amazing. And not just leading soldiers, but also leading civilians, because in my last few jobs, I've had more civilians as a workforce than I have military. But it goes back to what I talked about, doing something greater than yourself and being a part of a team that is truly shows a passion of what I have about, just making sure that folks are being taken care of. I have a community that I can actually relate to, and a sense of belonging,
Right.
to know that I am doing something every day that allows this nation to be free from
Right.
things that others don't have that ability to be able to do. It just makes me feel so proud.
No, and that moment right there was special, right? Because you know how happy you got knowing that what you do, right? You're living your purpose, and that's
Yeah,
amazing from a young girl to 30 years later. And I'm not trying to age you, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I started when
uh,
I was 2.
right, but right. But it's like a dream fulfilled, right?
Yeah.
And no, it's awesome. And when you said topography, right, it takes me back to like PLDC days, right, of walking around
Oh, uh-huh.
in the woods with the map,
With
right?
the map. That's
You know,
right.
shoot it back
Everybody
as me.
now, all they need is waves. They can put in their GPS, right?
I know. Back then, you had pace counts, and you had your little compass with a shoot a back azimuth because you're lost, and you're
Yes,
like, "What happened? I don't
yes,
know." Yeah.
yes.
So, no, that's interesting. So you were the ones developing our maps, and what's interesting too is like in my professional job, right, outside of doing the podcast and all that
Mhm.
for the government, is I deal with all the military construction, in here in Europe, and I deal with the engineers all of the
That's
time,
right.
and
Yeah,
I find it fascinating all the things that they have to calculate and all the variables and the amount of math and attention to detail that they have to put into their craft. And I'm a sucker for people that are smart, right? I love it, right? And to see them work so diligently and very methodical to construct something from nothing. So I might see a bunch of woods one day, and then 4 to 6 years later, I have this phenomenal building. It's all
absolutely.
flat. It has utilities and all of these
Yeah.
things.
And
And
it was
and
probably hills or whatever, but yeah, absolutely.
yeah, so
That's the great part.
yeah, so there's like that it's like that instant, not it's not even instant gratification because it takes so long, but that
Mhm.
gratification at the end of it to know that I contributed to this structure or this capability or this thing, right? That's going to be used for many, many decades, right? Not just, here in the moment. I'm an IT guy. We make things work and we get instant gratification because we put fingers on keyboards and things work, right? But to watch engineers work, they have the same face that you just made a few moments ago, and they're
No,
they're they're in it.
it-
They love
it-
it.
yeah, I mean, I go back to troop construction before I started was a commander in the Army Corps of Engineers. But as a captain, I had, my unit where we went to Arizona and we did there was a road for the Border Patrol that was patrolling along the U.S. Mexican border. And, it was horrendous, and to actually have this now to be one of which the border patrol was like, oh my gosh, we can get to where we need to get so much faster. We were trying to do this where we beat the monsoon season because we knew that was coming. And we were doing things as a organization that we had never done before, but with some expertise from like my first sergeant who had done it. So there too was a point for me because it wasn't necessarily about what I was doing, it was what the soldiers were doing, and the fact that they were getting gratification in, I'm building something that is not about me. I'm building something that's going to help someone else be better at their job. and what they were doing. And so I just, yeah, and I love seeing that with them too, because it was like, I didn't know I could do this. And now they're like, well, man, if I can do this, maybe there's something else that I can do too.
Yeah, and those are skills they can take with them for the rest of their lives, right? So, yeah. So, and then also, so you've had multiple deployments, right? I saw that on your bio, right? I saw Kabul, Afghanistan, and then I also saw, Kuwait. Tell me about those deployments, and what did you take away from those moments?
So my first deployment was as an individual augmentee, and that was in Kuwait, where we were in support of Iraq and Afghanistan and what was going through. I was responsible for the Department of Public Works as well as installation support. So your career center, your AFEs, your housing, but this was for all the bases that were in Kuwait that the U.S. was responsible for. The biggest takeaway from that deployment had to do with the fact that we had to work alongside the Kuwaitis because we were using some of their facilities. But being able to partner with another country and able to ensure that, again, we are working to keep other places safe was really phenomenal. And you learn to understand their culture as well as they understand yours, and that was truly a great time for me. The other two deployments were in Afghanistan. You mentioned the one in Kabul, which was the most recent. But prior to that, I was with a Fourth ID, and we were a special troops battalion, and we had an area of which we were responsible for. Mostly special troops battalions, they're like augmentation to the staff, but we actually were responsible for an area where we had forward operating bases. And though I was the executive officer of making sure, again, the soldiers had what they need to be able to do the missions. One of the things that I looked at too was the master planning of the bases, of the forward operating bases that we were doing. Again, here, not only are we working with Afghans, but we're also working with Marines. So this is the interaction of learning how to work outside of just your profession of what you do, and how you can learn from them as well as they learn from you, and from an operational standpoint, but also just as people, because a lot of times we don't get to know and understand the people that we work with because we're so focused on work like this. But having and appreciating someone's culture, I think, is just so important. And what I took away from all three of these deployments was about how blessed we are as being members of the United States, being an American, and the freedoms that we have that so many other nations don't necessarily have. And the last one in Kabul, I worked with 23 countries. I had a staff that was made up of people from Australia, from Spain, from Portugal, from Turkey. And so again, too, one common mission, working hand in hand, trying to understand each other, but at the end of the day, working together to ensure that this location is being able to be the best that it could in the environment and what we were dealing with at that particular time.
Yeah, what's interesting too, because when we're sent to these different geographic locations and we're working alongside partners and allies, you realize that you guys have a lot of commonality, right?
Absolutely.
We all love our family. We've all had hardship. We all want the same things for ourselves and others, right?
Mhm.
And you meet some very fascinating people. And then one of the things that you said too was like not just focusing on work, but focusing on the people. One of the things I do, and people at work, they get tired of me saying, I was like, look, it's just work at the end of the day. I don't get too, I'm very mellow. I never get too amped or too low.
Okay.
I'm like, look, it's just work. How's your family? How are your kids? Is your wife
Absolutely.
okay? I knew she had COVID, right? Like, things like that is having those meaningful connections that last forever,
Yes.
right? Because the work is infinite. It's never going to stop, right? Task saturation is the name of the game, but how can we as
Let me
people
write
come
that one
together?
down.
Right. No, I mean, because we
No.
we typically get caught up in the mundane tasks, right? We get frustrated with the work or the organization, but really it's the people left and right of us that we really care about. And that's what makes us come to work every day, right?
But and also, Eric, at the end of the day too, if we didn't have the people, we couldn't do the work, right? So we
Absolutely.
have to start with that, um and getting to understand them. So my husband's a middle school math teacher, and one of the things that he's taught me about is the fact that you everybody does not learn the same. And so his technique in teaching in his classroom of understanding the strengths and weaknesses of his kids so that he can be very specific to the individual, the one, or two children that may have a different mechanism of learning, but still trying to elevate them to the levels of which everybody is, on the can be on the same level of learning. And so I think it's the same way with us as our work teammates as well. We all don't work the same, but trying to figure out how do you maneuver in this space where getting to understand their best ways of how they do work, and then coalescing with them to make sure at the end of the day we do get the job done, but they understand that you appreciate them for who they are and what their true skill sets are that they bring to the table.
100%. I mean, I think it's a really good observation too, because like I was mentioning earlier, I'm not the young guy in the group any longer, right? I'm starting to become the elder statesman,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
now I'm having to really sometimes take a step back and let them lead, right? Because
Right.
that's the way
Power.
they know how to get after it, right? They're using their critical thinking, and just be there to say, hey, if we fail, right, let's learn from it, let's regroup, let's try it this way, but take in the input, right? I think too often as leaders we do not want to look vulnerable, right?
No, no, you're right.
And
Yeah.
sometimes we got to get out our own way if we really want to achieve the desired, effects or the desired outcomes that we hope to achieve. But no, it's really good because people do learn differently. I see that now, right? For me, it was I needed that Encyclopedia Britannica, right? Now for the younger workforce, everything's on the internet. It's
I
instant.
know. I
You know,
know. Yeah. Instant.
yeah.
But so you mentioned about being vulnerable, and as senior leaders, there's a couple books. Strength-based leadership 2.0. That is one that I've read, and then I'm just reading another one about action-based leadership. And in both of those books, they actually talk about how you have got to, as a senior leader, be able to listen,
Mhm.
not in understanding that you don't have all of the answers. Um, uh, People, I mean, things have changed so quickly, and we're so quick to be able to remember how we did things and want things to go that same way. But if we listen, just sometimes just take a step back and listen, and then empower those that are working for us to be able to move out on what it is that they are doing. But and then they know that they have your support.
Right.
Once they know that, I mean, the world could, I mean, they will do the world for what needs to be done. But and that's the empowerment piece as well. You talk about being the older statesman. Some of my colleagues and I talk about we are at the place now of the people we used to talk about. Like, oh my God, if you saw a general, you'd be like, oh, that's or even if you saw a colonel, it
Right.
was like, yeah, I mean, you just straighten up at attention and you listen to what it was that they actually had to say. But I'm finding more and more, not only do we have to listen to our senior leaders, but we've got to listen to our junior leaders as well, because they have so much insight, especially as this world is changing so quickly.
Yeah, and I think as we climb the ladder, right, that pyramid gets really, really tight, right? Really small
Sure.
group, right? And everything below us on that pyramid there's a lot of people down there, right? So they're all learning from each other, and if we don't, turn that pyramid on its head, no one's going to pour into us,
That's
right?
right.
Because we're not listening, right? So, no, that's a great point. So, all right, so you deploy, right? You are where you are, right? General officer now. You're at the peak, right? Well, not yet. I think you got a couple more
I don't,
steps to climb. Um,
I'm just enjoying the journey for sure.
all right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad I'm part of that journey. So thank you. Um, so in your career up to this point, right? What has been your toughest leadership challenge? And then, how did you resolve it? And, what did you learn from that?
Yeah, I can think of, first, I'll say that challenges to me are opportunities. Opportunities, number one, to grow and to learn. And so that one of the first leadership challenges that come to me, and maybe it's more of the frustration, is when I actually have individuals that I work with, or I always say with, not they don't work for me, but we work with them, that really don't understand the true potential of what they actually have, of trying to get them
Right.
to get a little bit more outside of their comfort zone. That
Right.
that that to me is a challenge, because it's like, I'm good. I'm good with where I am, and I'm like, no, you're not. You have so much more to give, and getting them to be able to see that they actually have that is to me is one of, I say it's a big challenge, because I want them to be great. I want them to be great in what they do. And so sometimes it's like having those crucial conversations with individuals, that hard nosed thoughts. And that's how I've navigated that, of just really sitting down and just kind of being raw and real. It's
Hmm.
like, nobody's going to give it to you like this. And so this is what I see. This is what I expect. And, you've got to make the decision of whether or not that's what you actually want to do. And so to me, then they make the choice. That's one. I'm going to give you two. And another is, I mean, I'm going to be honest, being a female, especially in a combat arms, and having sometimes your male counter, not just your counterparts, but others that think maybe you're not as capable because of the fact of who you are. And I've learned from that the only thing that I can do is give the best of who I am. And it's really not my issue, it's their issue.
Right.
But it took me a while to understand that. Thinking, okay, I've got to compete, and I've got to be, I've got to up them in everything that they actually do, or show them, prove to them that I am capable of being able to do these things. And, again, it goes back to your dad and my dad in my hand saying, be you, because everybody else is taken. Just be that best version of you. And yeah, I think it's worked out in my favor, to just do that. And so of the two that I've listed, I think that that last one has definitely been the most challenging.
Right.
But it feels so good when on the back end of that you have some of them to actually come around,
Right.
and now they see and they want to be a part of that team. Because I would always say, hey, I'm moving forward. Either you can get on the bus and come along, or we
Right.
can find something else for you to do that allows you not to necessarily take part in what it is that we're doing.
Yeah, so one of the things, me being a person of color too, right? Typically, I find myself as, the lone wolf at the table, right? There's not enough people that look like me at the table to make decisions or have influence. So one of the messages I give my daughters even now is that, look, you came into this world as a woman, right? That's going to be stigmatized, that's going to be marginalized in society, right? Because society isn't where it needs to be, right?
Yeah.
We're not that far removed where women couldn't even vote. So what I tell them too is you're also women of color, right? So you have to deal with all the isms that come with that as well. And I'm going to help you navigate that, because I'm going to tell you that you need to be exceptional just to get half the chance. But that half a chance that you get, be unapologetic about your success, and we're going to make sure that you're prepared. And my thing too is, like, even in the workplace now, is like, we as men need to have the conversation amongst ourselves to say, hey, we need to be better at what, at picking women up in the workplace or in our society, right? Because a lot of us have daughters,
Yes.
right? A lot of us have daughters. And like we talked about earlier, we have a lot of commonality as people, right? So they're not as different. And sometimes they're more capable, but because we don't want to be vulnerable, right? And we want to keep our position of power, that perceived power, we tend to marginalize and stigmatize and place isms and all these things on that population. So I tell my daughters all the time, it's like, look, be unapologetic about success and go be great, right?
Yeah, there's always a sense of humility, but it's always that thing about being, the best that you can. Just last week, a young lady, I'm going to give her Yolanda Moore. She actually played. She was a ninth grader when I was a senior. She played at Ole Miss, and she also played WNBA with the Comets. And so she was doing something the other day, and she said, it's okay to be the best. It's okay to be great. That's what
It
she
is.
said. And she was like, if you're the best person in your office, if you're the best in your industry, it's okay, and you don't need others to validate you in regards to that. But be okay with knowing that you are the best at what it is that you do. And I mean, that's what, at the end of the day, that's what we want everybody to be. As we stated, we all have a purpose here in life. And whatever that purpose is, hopefully, God has given you the intestinal fortitude to understand what it is, and you're living it. Because if we were not our best in being great at what it is that we were doing, just imagine how many things would not get accomplished. Just imagine how many times you as an individual, not that you're going for self-gratification or recognition, but would not have been elevated to
Right.
the levels of which you could help to make a difference with those that are coming behind you. Because now I feel like that's my main purpose, is that now that I am at this level, that it's to be able to see and understand those that are coming behind, to be able to make sure that that door stays open for them.
Right.
And the things are, we are doing the things that are right, and allowing them an opportunity to continue to demonstrate and show that it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. If you're giving what you're supposed to, it's going to all work out in your favor. That you be in whatever position you're supposed to be.
No, that was well said, because being a trailblazer and creating a pathway for others sometimes, takes you having to put yourself out there, right? And one of the things I would say to anyone listening here now that might have doubts is you don't have to placate anyone's insecurities, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just be great, be curious, be confident, and be great. The rest will take care of itself. So. All right, so we're coming to the end here. So I just have really my last question that I give all the guests, right? If there's that one, if you're trying to talk to that one person that's listening right now, right, that young professional, that young girl, if you're talking to my daughters, right, what would be that
Yeah.
that one thing that you want them to walk away with?
No matter what you actually do in life, there are going to be highs and lows. And in there being highs and lows, you've got to continue to think about, what is your why? Why are you doing what it is that you have decided that you're going to do? And in that, know that you're always, as again, I go back to what my father has said, is somebody's always watching you. And they're watching you from a standpoint of all the positive things that you are doing. Well, you can decide whether or not it's positive or negative, but hopefully in a positive light, because you too are serving as an example. And you don't have to be in a leadership position to be a leader. Leading and being a leader is just about helping others to be able to navigate and have influence on them, to help them to be the best version of the individual that they can actually be. Um, this journey for me is not one that I thought that would be. Again, I go back to, if you had told me more than 30 years ago that I would be, number one, in the Army, number two, that I would be a general officer in the Army, I would have told you that's not in my plans. But the path has already been laid. It's just listening and understanding and following what has been set forth for you, and enjoy the journey. Don't have fun, because we only get one life.
That's
And in
it.
that life, this is about having fun and enjoying. So at the end of the day, you can be able to say, I lived a life which I know had purpose, but it is also one of which I've truly, truly enjoyed being a part of, and wouldn't change, anything as to what you would do.
Okay. Well, I
Thank you
want
for
to,
having me here.
yeah, I really want to thank you for one, coming on and sharing your journey. I also want to say I'm proud of you.
Oh,
And thank you for blazing the trail and allowing my daughters to stand on your shoulders as they go off on their journey. And not accelerate failure. And, for everyone out there listening, I'm going to post a link to Brigadier General Gant's bio so you guys can check it out. If you have any questions that you want me to feed back and post, whether it's on YouTube or on my website, you can write me at Erick, ERICK, at leadershipistricky.com. And for those that are tuning in for the first time, thank you for tuning in to Leadership is Tricky. And those that are repeat listeners, thank you. Season 5 has been going strong. We've just hit 30,000 downloads.
congratulations.
Thank you. And yeah, we're all over the place right now. I've got folks in Sri Lanka, Nepal,
Oh
and
my gosh.
yeah, we're still #2 in Peru for some reason, but we're out there. But no, thank you for taking the time to get this scheduled, for coming on and sharing your story with me. I will see you next week.
Yes, I will see you next week. Thank you so much.
All
This has
right.
been great.
And we'll connect in DC. So we're saying goodbye from here. Leadership is Tricky is off the net. Thank you.